Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the B block or second section of our news this week. I'm Alaina Pinto. Despite the stalling of federal reform, states continue to grow their markets. Well, at least the states that have launched their adult use legal programs. New Hampshire's reform effort took another hit this week, and it looks like adult use might never get passed in the live free or die state. Now, senators in New Hampshire narrowly voted to table a House-passed adult use legalization bill for the next session. The vote was 12 to 10, and it will basically stall and pass on any more legalization discussion during this session of Congress in that state. Perhaps that's a good thing because their new governor, Kelly Ayotte, is already on record saying she will never sign an adult use legalization bill if passed by her legislature at any point during her tenure as governor. No such issue in Michigan, where that state has a robust cannabis market contributing to the over $123 billion legal cannabis market in the United States. Here's Michigan's Amie Carter with a report on the impact of President Trump's tariff trade war on the Michigan market.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters for this week's Michigan Report from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Another week brings a fresh wave of headlines from Michigan's cannabis industry. Whether you're a professional in the field or simply an interested consumer, we've got the essential news you need. Let's dive in. Tariff troubles. The on-again, off-again tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump are unsettling Michigan's economy, particularly impacting the cannabis sector, which relies significantly on imported components for vape pens, as well as packaging and other supplies, now facing tariffs as high as 145%. Rough road ahead. Brian Hanna, the state's chief cannabis regulator, recently informed state lawmakers that he anticipates many dispensaries will either close or merge their operations in the coming 5 years, primarily because the state's supply of cannabis is exceeding consumer demand. Lock It Down, Michigan's largest cannabis lobbying group, is reportedly urging lawmakers to issue a freeze on retail licenses, at least until the industry can stabilize in light of falling prices, narrow profit margins, and intense competition from the black market. This call for a license freeze contradicts the language of the 2018 law that cannabis pioneers helped craft. That legislation decentralized licensing power, allowing local municipalities to dictate how many cannabis businesses can operate within their boundaries, essentially making the number of available licenses limitless. As the situation develops, it remains to be seen how lawmakers will respond to these pressing concerns. I will be sure to keep you updated. A skunky smell reported by local residents near what was thought to be an abandoned building recently led Barron County authorities to uncover over 550 cannabis plants and 34 pounds of cannabis that were allegedly grown and harvested without a state license. That'll do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters.
There's a disturbing trend in our country lately where cannabis dispensaries, grow farms, hemp stores are all targets for violent crimes. Over the past few weeks, Marianne Cursetjee has reported on her industry coming under attack from criminals in Oregon. And now that violent trend has spread to Illinois. Here's the Chicago clone guy, Mark Allen, with more.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting from just outside of Chicago, Illinois for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is Bird. Thanks for tuning in. Unfortunately, we got an arsonist in Chicago breaking into dispensaries, a MSO dispensary and a hemp dispensary in Chicago, and literally throwing Molotov cocktails into that thing. I guess people like burning dispensaries and cyber trucks recently with Molotov cocktails. Interesting times. Stop it. Downtown Chicago, so that's pretty weird going on. We need to stop that stuff going on. So any information on that, let us know. Let's bust this guy. In good news, Illinois has had and is continuing to push a service program that helps clear and seal convictions, cannabis convictions for people for free. They've already helped over 5,000 people clear their criminal record, and they announced that there's 80,000 more people to help in Illinois that they can expunge their criminal records. 80,000 people with cannabis criminal records that now there's a free program to clear their records, which I think is great, but who's paying for that? Like, just expunge it. But that's my 2 cents that nobody asked for, once again. But that pretty much sums up this week's news for Chicago and the Illinois surrounding area. I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago Clone Guy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Hi, I'm Matthew Friedlander with Skagit Organics, coming to you with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. So the Washington State legislative session has officially ended, and we had a fairly eventful session this year. There were 4 pieces of cannabis legislation that passed. The 2 most notable ones were legislation dealing with collective bargaining for cannabis agricultural workers and limiting management agreements for licensed retailers. In Washington, you were only allowed to own 5 retail licenses, but many stores have been getting around this to expand beyond those 5 with management agreements that essentially give them full control over a licensed store without actually owning the license. I've talked about this before in previous reports, and some legislation was passed this year to try to rein that in and to deal with that. So we'll see how that shakes out. We expect that there will be some lawsuits springing up from this. On the event side of things, the Cannabis Alliance, full disclosure, I sit on the board of the Cannabis Alliance. We are Washington's largest and most effective cannabis trade group. We are hosting our 10th annual Washington Cannabis Summit on May 9th in Seattle. There are virtual options to attend this if anyone is interested. You can find information at thecannabisalliance.us. Also, the Leaf Bowl is coming up May 31st, I believe, down in the Tacoma area on tribal lands. So this is an awards show and event celebrating Washington's cannabis brands, and we are excited to participate in that once again. And we are looking forward to having some fun with our friends at the end of May. So that's what I've got for you this week out of Washington State. I am Matthew, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Since Marianne Cursetjee was in New Jersey this week, she and PCM TV founder Jimmy Young got together at MJ Unpacked in Atlantic City for her Oregon report.
Thanks, Alaina. Welcome back to the special edition of the Cannabis Coast to Coast News special report on location in Atlantic City, New Jersey, the site of MJ Unpacked, one of the premier B2B conferences in the cannabis industry. I am PCM TV founder Jimmy Young and the executive producer of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, and you never know when you go out in the field at a conference who you're going to run into, unless, of course, you know that Marianne Cursetjee from Oregon is here, because that's what happened. And of course, she won't be doing her Oregon report from Oregon. She's here in New Jersey, and we're going to let her get away with it because she's a prize-winning cultivar now in Oregon. Marianne, congratulations for what you've done with Alibi, first of all. But my first question, we get to talk about Alibi in a second, it has to do with the crime wave that is attacking the cannabis industry in Oregon, robberies, assaults. Is law enforcement taking any interest at all in helping the industry out now that they've been targeted?
No, sadly, law enforcement seems to be turning a blind eye. But you're totally right, Jimmy. There's been this massive crime wave. In the space of about 2 weeks, we had over 20 licensed facilities broken into in the middle of the night. The perpetrators would steal vehicles and use them to drive into the walls, break in, do destruction, lots of theft and property damage, and then take off in their stolen vehicles and never be found by the police.
Are they after cash or product, as far as you know, or both?
Yes, both, but primarily product. It's weird. There's licensees who have a variety of products sitting around, and they pick and choose what they take. I think it's the rumors I've heard are that they're out-of-state gangs coming in. So it's really hard to tell where it's coming, but it's so bad that licensees have teamed together to hire private investigators so they can track these down, because we as licensees need to stick together and help each other out since the government isn't there to help us.
if I remember correctly from your reports in the past, the Portland cannabis market, another PCM, actually had to close. Is that right?
They did, yeah. Several businesses have had to close. The Oregon market is tough anyway, and then this is just one more thing that you have to deal with. And if you're on the edge, there's just no coming back from this.
That's just crazy, unfair, it's unjust, and especially when law enforcement doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. And yet, if you guys 5, 10, 15 years ago had cannabis, they'd be busting you very quickly, right? So this just is, again, the growing pains of a legitimate industry, and also the confusion between federal law and state laws, right?
Yeah, it's hard because if we had a normal business, we could teach our staff, and I'm not advocating for gun violence, but there are places for using guns and weapons for self-defense, but we're not allowed to do that in cannabis. So our options of protecting ourselves are very limited, and so far police haven't shown up to help.
That's just crazy. But another good reason why Alibi, now a 2-time winner of a cultivar in Oregon. First of all, congratulations on that. And more importantly, she's expanding here to the East Coast in New York City, and the New Jersey market is kind of part of that, but even though officially it's not. And it doesn't need to be, because New York's going to be a huge market anyway. First of all, congratulations on winning these awards. How important is it as a grower to have a resume, a plaque on the wall that says we were the best at this?
Well, it's interesting because there are lots of competitions in the industry, and many of them have historically been pay to play. So I don't really believe in a lot of competitions. They're kind of ego trips, and people with lots of money buy awards. But this one we chose to participate in, and it was blind judging. So experienced buyers and consumers from around the state of Oregon got samples. They were not given any information about what it was, no information about how it was grown or cultivated, anything. And they picked Alibi's product as the best one. So that's a huge honor because, as you know, Oregon is such a tough market, but we do grow some of the best flower in the country.
There you go. And that's Marianne Cursetjee. The brand is Alibi. You're watching Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Next up is Arizona, where the Hemp Industry Trade Association is fighting back against that state's attorney general. Here's Karen Black with that story.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Arizona's hemp industry is fighting back in court. The Hemp Industry Trade Association of Arizona filed a special action lawsuit against the state's attorney general after enforcement began on what she deemed are unlicensed retailers selling hemp-derived THC products. HEDA claims AG Mays misinterpreted the law and argued the products are federally illegal. The organization sought to block the state from enforcing the ban while the case plays out. Although the judge denied HEDA's request for an immediate pause, a crucial hearing is set for May 9th, where the future of Arizona's hemp market hangs in the balance. There's more controversy in the Grand Canyon state. The acting health director resigned this past week, citing an unfavorable political climate and no apparent path to confirmation as reasons for stepping down. Arizona's Department of Health Services manages the state's cannabis licensing program. On the legislative front, the advertising restriction bill passed the state Senate after major amendments. The bill now focuses only on actual cannabis and cannabis products, dropping earlier restrictions on THC-related items and allowing businesses that sell paraphernalia, not just licensed dispensaries, to advertise. The changes aim to protect youth while giving small businesses more clarity and flexibility. The bill heads back to the House, where lawmakers will decide whether to accept the amendments or send the bill to a conference committee for further negotiation. There's been no movement on the bill that would allow 18 rural opportunity licenses and dual medical adult use licensees in rural areas, and the measure to release clinical cannabis research funds is awaiting a House third read. Lawmakers are working to finalize these measures as the session nears its end. Meanwhile, a bill that aimed to shift cannabis tax revenue from community programs to law enforcement for cracking down on the illicit market died quietly without a Rules Committee hearing. Despite strong industry backing, the bill stalled this session, but similar proposals are expected to return next year. And lastly, Arizona's father of cannabis law, Ryan Hurley, was interviewed on Phoenix's local NPR station as part of a series about Gen Xers. Mr. Hurley, who grew up in the Dare and Just Say No generation, was instrumental in the effort to legalize medical cannabis in Arizona and helped draft the health department regulations for the medical cannabis program. That's all for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Green Baker Consulting, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the B block, but we have more state reports coming up in the C block. Plus, we return to Atlantic City and MJ Unpacked to hear from one of the most powerfully successful entrepreneurs, Precious Osagie Erese from the Precious Canna Company.
I want to hold this industry accountable to make sure that if we're going to continue to be in this industry, you are supporting those who are still locked up for this, okay? Because it's not cute.
What if we're right? What if all of a sudden they discovered that there is medical use for marijuana and that it is good for you and it's better than alcohol and it's better than opioids and it helps your health? What if we're right? What if they find that out?
Specific cannabinoids have medical value. These are facts.
I'm here today in hopes to assist in removing the demonized stigma of cannabis and the perception that cannabis is just about getting high. The true base of this plant has to be known.
I don't think anybody should ever go to jail for cannabis. Get some medicine, and everybody should have access to it.
This is something which, at the very, very least, is the key to alleviating suffering and extending life for millions of human beings. Right? For returning some kind of balance to our society, and quite possibly of restoring our planet's natural balance as well.